The day my husband left me at 73. I was 73 years old when my husband stood at the foot of my bed and calmly informed me that I no longer mattered to him. After 48 years of marriage, that was how our story ended. No tears, no apology, not even a word of gratitude for the woman who had spent nearly half a century standing beside him. I was recovering from surgery, surrounded by medical bills and uncertainty, when Thomas walked into the room wearing the suit I had given him on our 40th wedding anniversary. Beside him stood Brooke, a beautiful 35-year-old woman who looked at me as though she had already won. Thomas stared at me without a trace of emotion. "You're old," he said. Then he added, "and you're sick." A moment later came the final blow. "I'm leaving you for someone who still has value." The affair itself was not the shock. I had known about Brooke for months. What shattered my heart was the way he said it, as if 48 years of shared memories, sacrifices, and devotion meant absolutely nothing. Then he began dividing our life together as casually as someone sorting through unwanted furniture. The company would be his. The properties would be his. The investments would be his. I would receive only enough to survive. To his surprise, I smiled. His eyes narrowed. "Why are you smiling?" he demanded. I looked at him calmly. "I just remembered something your father once said." His curiosity immediately surfaced. "What was that?" I smiled again. "He said you were a charming man, but an incredibly careless one." Thomas left that day convinced he had won. What he didn't know was that the real game had not even begun. Minutes after he walked out, I opened a small drawer beside my bed and pulled out a phone he never knew existed. I dialed a single number. "Diane," I said when she answered. "He's gone." "Good," she replied. Diane was not only my closest friend, she was also my attorney. And she knew a secret I had been hiding from Thomas for nearly 2 years. 2 years earlier, after receiving a serious medical diagnosis, I began reviewing every aspect of my life. That process led me to a painful realization. Thomas wasn't worried about my health. He was worried about my money. So Diane and I quietly began examining decades of financial records, legal documents, and business agreements. What we discovered changed everything. The fortune Thomas proudly claimed he had built alone had never truly been his. My inheritance had funded the early years. My savings had rescued the company during its darkest moments. My investments had helped finance its growth and expansion. Yet, over time, Thomas had convinced everyone, including me, that he alone deserved the credit. Fortunately, paperwork doesn't lie. For 2 years, Diane and I carefully documented everything, protected my legal interests, and reorganized key assets. Meanwhile, Thomas was so confident in his control that he never bothered reading the documents placed in front of him. That would become his greatest mistake. 3 months later, we met in court. Thomas entered with a confident smile. Brooke sat beside him, equally certain of victory. But their confidence began to fade the moment Diane placed stack after stack of evidence before the judge. Every document told the story of my contribution. Every record dismantled another piece of Thomas's narrative. The truth that had remained hidden for decades was finally impossible to ignore. By the end of the hearing, everything had changed. The ruling was not revenge. It was justice. I received the share of the wealth I had spent a lifetime helping create. Thomas walked out of that courtroom looking as though the ground beneath him had disappeared. Only 6 weeks later, Brooke left him. She had never loved the man. She loved the lifestyle. And when the money shrank, so did her affection. Within a year, Thomas lost far more than his fortune. He lost his influence, his social standing, his friends, his carefully crafted image. As for me, I began building a new life. I focused on my health, I traveled, I spent precious time with my children and grandchildren. Most importantly, I rediscovered who I was. For the first time in decades, I was no longer Thomas's wife. I was simply Eleanor, and that felt wonderful.
Nearly 2 years later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I barely recognized the man standing there. Thomas looked older, tired, defeated. His voice trembled as he spoke. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Then he apologized. Not the shallow apology of a man who regretted losing money. A genuine apology from someone who finally understood what he had lost. He had lost me. I accepted his apology, but I did not accept him back. Some bridges can be rebuilt. Others exist only to remind us where we should never return. Before leaving, Thomas handed me a small box. Inside was the diamond bracelet Brooke had taken years earlier. Then he turned to walk away. "Thomas!" I called. He stopped and looked back. "I don't hate you." His eyes widened with surprise. I smiled gently. "I simply learned that my worth was never connected to your opinion of me." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he nodded and walked away. This time, forever. On my 75th birthday, my home and garden were filled with laughter, family, and friends. As we celebrated, my granddaughter raised her glass. "Grandma taught us something important," she said. I smiled. "And what is that?" She looked around at everyone gathered there before answering. Growing older doesn't reduce a person's value. It reveals the strength that was inside them all along. As applause filled the air, I finally understood the full truth. Thomas had been wrong about many things, but his greatest mistake was believing that leaving me would destroy me, because the day he walked away was not the day my life ended. It was the day I finally began living it on my own terms.
If this story stayed with you, if it touched something deep inside you, please leave a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for being here.